This morning we have with us two well-known Owen Sounders who have achieved a very considerable measure of fame in hockey, Harry Kazarian lacrosse. But our guest that we haven't had before with us is Harry Lumley, and I think no one can deny that Harry Lumley was one of the all-time great NHL goaltenders. He's probably Owen Sound's greatest hockey player, and we've had a lot of great hockey players in Owen Sound. But we'd like to hear some of the details of his career, and it's been a very colorful career. He started out very, very young. So some of these things we're going to find out from Harry Lumley, and his friend Harry Kazarian will be able to fill in on some of the details. They've been great friends over the years and are great friends today. It's a pleasure to have you with us, Harry, and your sidekick, Harry Kazarian. He's been a character over the years, hasn't he? He gives us a hard time. I guess, is that an indication of his friendship and affection, or what would you say?
Well, he's so darn well known by everybody that it is friendship.
I think so. Now, Harry, you were you born in Owen Sound? Tell us.
Born and raised in Owen Sound. My parents' name were Frank and Laura Lumley. And
they were Owen Sounders?
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm. And what family members?
Well, I have two sisters and a brother, and I'm the youngest.
You're the youngest?
Oh, yeah.
Well, baby of the family, some baby.
My dad didn't say that.
He didn't say that. Now, when you were a boy in school, did you ever dream of professional sport?
Farthest thing from my mind.
Is that a fact?
Mm-hmm.
Were you active in public school and sport? Particularly active?
Well, that's when they had the outdoor rinks,
Mm-hmm.
and as a matter of fact, I played defense in public school.
Do you suppose your sidekick has enough courage to tell us all, as he told it once on tape, how you came to be a goaltender as he recalled it?
Well, he never showed up. And he was the goalie, and I had to take his place.
Now, he has a little different version of it. Would you like to tell us your version?
No, I got to give Bill Garbett credit for him.
Yeah.
He said he was too big and awkward to be a defenseman. He'd be better off in goal.
Well, what
And
about
he said,
you?
they turned around and took me out of goal and put me on defense. I don't know why, because I wasn't that big.
No, you weren't. At that time, you didn't cover a lot of net. But at any rate, so you...
But he was a lot faster than I was, so we thought it'd be better.
Well, that was the start. Now you played, so this was, how old would you be? You'd be in high school perhaps by that time.
Well, no, I was in public school.
Still public school.
Yeah, there was three gentlemen at that time that looked after the minor sport before we went to school. That was Ted Beatty, Bill Garbett, and Tiny Moffat.
Early in the morning?
Early in the
They were
morning.
down to
It was 7 to 8 in the morning. Then you'd fall asleep in school.
If we didn't have the
Wore
dime,
yourself out and playing hockey
if
first
we
thing in
never
the
had the
morning.
dime to pay to play that morning, Ted Beatty or one of them would put it in for us.
They deserve a lot of credit.
They certainly do.
I'll say.
And Bill Garbett was the arena manager at that time.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
And he'd been active in Sunday school work. He'd done a lot for boys.
Yes, he did.
And he had junior hockey, of course, and lacrosse and hockey, and junior baseball, I meant to say. Bill had been a baseball pitcher himself. Now, as regards this minor hockey, you played goal then. How big were you? And how old were you at that time?
Oh, 10 up.
You're a pretty big kid, though, then, weren't
Yes, I was.
you? As boys go. And were you fellows friends at that time? You know
Oh,
each
yeah.
other? Yeah.
Yeah. We used to go swimming a lot in the summer.
We lived side by each on 3rd Avenue.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, when the new arena was built, that was the beginning of something insofar as it gave sport a great shot in the arm.
Well, it was a great thing for minor sport, for the kids to get started in the hockey, and in the summertime, the lacrosse started to get quite popular then.
That's right. So things started to really go ahead. Now, it's strange that this didn't happen very often, that I ever heard of anyway. When you played your first organized hockey, insofar as OHA hockey is concerned, you played intermediate, and you're still a boy, and quite a young boy. Tell us a bit about that, who you played for and with, and so on.
There was their intermediate team. We won the Ontario Championship, by the way. As a matter of fact, I think
Yeah.
you and I roomed together.
We roomed together and we played, the final game was in Powassan.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Powassan had great hockey clubs at that time.
Yes, at that time.
We did.
And who else played in the club?
Well, there was Cy Proctor,
He's quite a goal scorer, big, strong fellow,
big,
quite
strong,
a reach. Yeah.
and C. Shears, Kenny Dolson. Oh, there's McConaughey.
Jack McConaughey played defense.
Mm-hmm. Andy Blair.
Andy Blair, yeah.
Warpy Tennant.
Warpy Tennant.
Fudge Foster.
Mm-hmm.
See, Warpy was quite a figure on skates too, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
Could he go?
Mm-hmm.
He was good in the skates. He wasn't a goal scorer, but he was maybe a little like Eddie Shack,
I think
in that
Bill
he
O'Leary.
gave it a great
Bill-
effort and he was a crowd
Yeah,
pleaser.
Bill O'Leary.
Bill O'Leary was there too.
Bill Davey.
Bill
No,
O'Leary.
O'Leary.
Oh, yeah. Bill O'Leary, yeah. So, and that was, what year was that, Harry?
About 41 or 42 in there.
Mm-hmm. And were you 16 then, 15?
No, 14 or 15.
Well, I'd like to tell when I came across you first, the first time I had heard of you, somebody come into the lacrosse dressing room, maybe it's 1940 or could have been 41, I'm not sure, and said, you should see what's going on out on the floor. Bun White's blazing them in there, and Bun White could shoot. He could
Could he
really
ever?
blaze them in. Bun White, and there's a kid out there in goal, and he's never turning a hair. He said, you should see him. So some of us went out to see this performance, and you were in goal. And at that time, there was no mask, not
No.
much in the way of pads. Gee, the shots would go sailing by a fellow's ears. So anyway, now, shortly after that, so you won that intermediate B championship, about 42.
Mm-hmm.
That was the orphans. And who was in charge of that club? Who's the manager?
Slim Mercer,
Tom Ramage.
Ramage.
Ah, yes.
And Kitch Haswell
Mm-hmm.
was
Kitch Haswell was
Yeah.
welcome too.
Mhm.
Wow. So that's a pretty good club. Now that was a remarkable thing. When you're first OHA hockey, you're playing a championship club and an intermediate club, and you're 14 or 15 years of age. And I recall at 16, you went down, we'd won the Senior B lacrosse championship that year. We played an exhibition game in Fergus against the Fergus, it was Brampton Senior Club, and they strengthened a bit with a couple of Hamilton Tigers that you fellows played with afterwards, Arnold Smith and Norm Worthy, and they were top-notch seniors.
Yes, they certainly were.
And by golly, we beat them that game. I had to look that up. I thought they beat us. They had a great team, but we had played up until a short time before, and their season had ended earlier, so we were in better shape than they were. But I recall in that game, you could hit twice in the side of the head, the face, or the jaw, or something, knocked down just like you'd been hit over the head with a club, and you get up to your feet. And you're hanging onto the goalpost saying, I'm all right, I can play, I'm all right.
Didn't
It's
know
a good
any
thing
better.
because we didn't have any of the goaltender. I thought that was quite a performance, and apparently we won that game. That sticks out in my mind. Now, we played, there's some more lacrosse. You fellows went and tell us about that, Harry. You went down to Hamilton.
Yeah, we went down to Hamilton in the summer, I think, of
About 43?
yeah, about 43. Russell T. Kelly, the Minister of Health, was running the team.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure just who coached them, whether
Well, I think Jerry Johnson.
Jerry Johnson was playing coach.
Yeah. Well, used to say
Yeah, we
Jerry
stayed at
Johnson.
Jerry
Jerry's. We
stayed.
stayed at
You had a lively time there.
We just moved right in with the other 5 children.
Well, Jerry and Marge Johnson remember those days
Well,
kindly.
I
I'll
don't
never
know.
forget
Fond
them.
days.
You know, there's a lot of people who will never forget those days.
So that's about 43. Now, that's pretty fast company, and senior A lacrosse was rough.
It was then.
You weren't so big then, Harry.
No.
But you were. How much would you weigh at that time? You were a pretty big kid.
Oh, 200.
You won't mind me calling you a kid because you were pretty young then.
Oh, yes.
But you're a pretty good sized lad. You could handle yourself with
Well,
those fellows.
Lum was
Without any
16,
trouble.
I was 17.
Mm-hmm.
So at least that's about the age of it.
Yeah.
But Bobby Goldham was there, Bill Isaacs.
One of the NHL great defensemen too,
mhm.
Bob Goldham. And Bill Isaacs was one of the all-time great lacrosse players,
Certainly
unquestionably.
was.
The Indian
And
forward,
one of the Jamesons, I'm not sure if it was Rance
or Bobby.
or Bobby. It was one of the Jamesons.
Yeah, they're good lacrosse players. So now let's continue with this hockey a bit. You went to play. You didn't play junior hockey in Owen Sound either. You went to
No.
play hockey in Galt,
We
didn't
went to Galt
you? Junior A.
for junior A tryout. Yeah.
And then so you played them 2 years,
Yeah.
Galt?
Harry went with me the first year, and then he only just stayed there long enough for them to move him to Detroit from there.
So they, at that time, what were you, about 16 then?
Yeah, that'd be the fall of '43. He'd be 16.
And so you go into pro hockey
Yeah, I went to Indianapolis. Well, I went to Detroit training camp.
training camp
And,
From Galt.
From Galt.
from the Galt Juniors, yeah.
hmm And they sent me to Indianapolis, which was a farm team of the Red Wings.
Was that a tremendous thrill?
Well, it certainly was, but them were warriors, and most of the players down there were young like myself.
A few veterans, well, there's a number of veterans, real stalwarts with Detroit. Detroit had a good NHL club then.
Well, but I'm talking about Indianapolis,
Yeah, mhm.
and they were mostly kids there.
Did they give you any inclination and any inkling at all that you stood a good chance of getting up with the
Oh, no,
Detroit club?
no.
They didn't tell you anything
No,
about these things.
no.
But you signed a pro contract with
Mhm.
Detroit, played for Indianapolis,
hmm
and Harry continued at
I
Galt.
stayed in Galt.
Galt,
Yeah.
What was the name of that club? They call them
Galt.
Red Wings?
Kiss.
The first year they called them Kiss Canadians, and the second year it was Red Wings.
The Red Wings. And then that second year, too, you get into the Memorial Cup playdowns with...
Oh, that was the first year.
That's the first
I
year,
went down
wasn't
as a military replacement for someone in the Montreal Royal Juniors. Doug McMurdy from St. Catharines and myself both went down.
I remember reading, I was in Hamilton, reading that in Hamilton paper, and said, I know that fellow. By God, I was really tickled to see that. So now, at the Detroit, at the junior Detroit's Junior A camp at Detroit, there's a lot of fellows there who became outstanding NHL players. You recall some of them? Of course, the greatest one was around at that time was Gordie Howe, eh?
Yeah, Gordie Howe was in Galt and stayed there the one winter and didn't play, just exhibition. He was too young for a branch transfer.
Oh, I see.
He was only 15,
Oh,
and he couldn't.
couldn't get it.
No, he had to sit out that year.
You see,
But
played
he practiced
exhibition
with the team, I
games,
suppose.
Oh, he
practiced.
practiced
played-
with them.
And Pete Babando was there that year, and Lee Fogel, another ex-Detroiter, was there.
Yeah.
Marty Pavlich come the next year.
All these fellows became
All
good
all
NHL
went to the
players.
NHL.
Now, was there any thought that Gordie Howe was going to be a standout at that time? Did he look that good as
Well,
a player?
the scouting reports were that he was going to be a superstar.
They were.
Oh, yeah.
He was a big kid then, too.
Oh, yes.
Strong, good skater. He'd score goals.
Oh, well, his first year when he went to come to Detroit, he never scored that many goals, but he gained a lot of experience, and he never looked back.
That's right. So you played regularly with Indianapolis. This was the idea to get... Now, goaltenders and defensemen usually take quite a while to gain experience.
Well, as
But
the Warriors were on, and
Yeah,
they were.
so that was a break.
Yeah, that was my break, and I guess they're a little desperate too.
Well, there had to be ability in there because there's still a lot of fellows looking for jobs and a lot of good goaltenders that were competing for those jobs. So you went up with Detroit when? You went one year at Indianapolis.
Well, I played 2 games with Detroit. my first year in Indianapolis, and the following year I went back to Indianapolis for a few games, and then I come back up to Detroit, and I stayed there permanently.
Do you recall some of the players with Detroit at that time that?
Well, there was Sid Howe, Mutt Bruneto.
Was Ted Lindsay playing then?
No.
He came
No,
later.
He came later. He come when Howe come.
What about Jack Stewart? Was he playing then?
Well, he was in the service then.
He was.
Yeah.
He was away. Yeah.
And the following year he come back.
Come back.
And that's when Sid Abel come back too.
Was
So
Joe
for-
Carveth there then?
Yeah, Joe Carveth.
Well, now you how come you were called up for 2 games? That's for your first year.
Well, just to
Injury?
see what
What you could do.
Yeah, and which
Were you-
wasn't
were
too
you-
good.
Were you nervous?
Well, naturally.
Yeah, yeah. Now, some people, Benny Grant told me that said he was always high-strung the day of a game. He'd be, he said some fellows would be sick, literally sick.
Well, yes, it's
they'd
true.
bring up, for
Yeah.
goodness sakes, and he said sometimes they'd make other fellows sick just because.
Well, Glenn Hall was notorious for being.
That's right.
Yeah.
But we'll get into Glenn Hall and Terry Sawchuk, too, because this was quite a remarkable thing. We'll get into that a little later. Now, when you were, did they tell you at any time, the Detroit organization, because they figured that you had a future, there's no question of that, did they frown on this business of playing softball and lacrosse and so on in the summer months?
Well, they didn't say anything about softball, but they frowned on the lacrosse. I played 1 season lacrosse for Owen Sound,
Yeah.
and then they made me quit the following year.
I see. But it's fun as far as you're concerned.
Well, it was.
You were playing defense.
Yeah. Well, you're using different muscles, and there's no doubt you went to training camp in good shape, but you're using different muscles altogether, and it takes you a while to get your timing
Is it?
back.
And they realized that.
Yeah.
I often wondered about that. Now, when you, would you say that your greatest attribute was what? Were you a stand-up goaltender, rather than a goaltender that dove for the puck and
Well, I believe I was more of a stand-up.
yeah, you covered a fair amount of net too.
Yes.
A lot of goaltenders were small but very agile.
Yeah, and small feet. I had big feet.
Helped him kick out the fuss. Would you say he was agile, Harry?
Sure was.
Now this was in good hands as well as a good eye.
Mm-hmm.
Now a goaltender has to almost anticipate, doesn't he, what some of the players are going to do. You study them, I guess.
Well, a lot of times you don't have a chance to study the
It
play.
all happens so quickly.
Mhm.
If you're good when you do the right thing, most of the time.
Well, some nights things go right for you, other nights they don't.
Yeah, that's right. That's true enough. Now you went up with Detroit. Who'd you room with at Detroit when you were on the road? Did they put you in with a veteran? Did they put you in with a
Well,
rookie?
there was. I was the rookie.
You were the rookie.
Yeah.
Wow. And did you what'd you do when you went out of town? Was it difficult to put in the time? Was that boring? Going?
No, you did a lot of time traveling. You're on trains mostly, and the day of a game you might go to a movie. That's it.
And how do the other fellows treat you? They kid you a lot because you're young?
Oh yes, it's all good natured.
The the newspapers referred to you as apple cheeks because of the color in your cheeks, and this is something that caught
Oh,
on.
yeah.
It wasn't. They overdid this sort of a thing,
Oh, wow.
actually. But this is the newspapers have to pick on something.
Well, they got to write about something too.
That's right. Did they treat you kindly on the whole?
Well,
The press?
if you're
You
winning,
can't fight with them.
No, if
You're gonna lose.
they've got the last say.
That's right. You can't win.
No.
But I think you got a pretty good press on the whole. Some fellows in sport resent criticisms of the newspaper people, but as you say, often it's not perhaps that they're particularly down on a person, but they got to have something to write about, and they pick up on little things and sometimes play it out.
Well, it's unfortunate they can make a big story out of just one line,
Yeah, that's right.
and
Something insignificant.
and everybody interprets it differently.
Now, so you became a regular with the Red Wings. How many games in the schedule at that time?
At that time, there was 50. Then 2 years they graduated to 60, and another year later, why they went to 70. And when I finished, why they were playing 70 games.
70 game schedule.
Yeah. Mhm.
Now, what is it up? It's more
I
than
believe
that.
it's 80,
80
82.
somehow.
Pretty close,
Plus protracted
yeah.
playoffs. One goaltender then, or did they carry a second?
One
goaltender?
goalkeeper.
Did you feel the pressure of just? I guess most of them carried one goaltender, and they usually had a good goaltender in the wings with a farm club.
Well, yes, but if the visiting club, if their goalkeeper happened to get hurt, the home team supplied a goalkeeper for,
There was a standby goaltender for all the games.
yeah. Mhm. But he could be the trainer, assistant trainer,
Lefty Wilson.
Lefty Wilson, for example. Oh, yes.
Yeah. Well, he'd have to have some ability. It wouldn't be a complete sham, but
No, but he wasn't a
but
pro.
they were,
He-
that's right. They were thinking in terms of money. They weren't.
Oh, gosh, yes,
and
that's for sure.
that's the point we gotta bring up. This was professional sport, and this is business. The owners knew it as business. The general managers knew it as business. Did the players, on the whole, look at it as a business-like way at that time, or was this just beginning to dawn? Now they nearly all have agents.
Yes, they do.
Did you ever have an agent? A
No,
business agent?
no, never had.
Too early for that.
Mhm.
Conducted-
Well, nobody had an agent then.
Benny Grant tells the story of Lionel Conacher telling his younger brother Charlie how to get along with Connie Smythe when it came to negotiations. He said, you go into his office and put your feet up in his desk, pull your hat down over your eyes and tell him how much you want.
I can imagine them doing that to Smythe. He wouldn't be in the office too long.
Yeah, next train down to Pittsburgh.
advice. Dear. But Smythe was pretty tough. Just a little guy, but kind of a tyrant, wasn't he?
Well, it was the military in him. He was a major in the Army, but he was a well-respected man, and I enjoyed working for him tremendously.
Did you?
Hmm.
Now, Jack Adams was your first general manager. Was he the coach of the club at that time, too, or did he have a
No,
coach?
well, yes, he was.
He was-
And then a couple of years later, why Tommy Ivan come in.
Tommy Ivan went on to Chicago
Later,
later, yes.
Mhm. After I got traded from Detroit to Chicago. Well, Ebby Goodfellow was the coach there in Chicago.
Very good fellow, and he'd been a great Detroit defenseman
Oh, yes,
for a good many
for-
years. Very outstanding.
Yeah, and a real gentleman. Tommy Ivan took over a few years later than that.
So, you're how many years at Detroit?
6.
6 years at Detroit. Now, Detroit was in the very fortunate position of having another young goaltender coming along. You were an established NHL goaltender, probably looking for big wages to commensurate with your standing. But they had a young fellow coming along.
Yeah,
Terry Sawchuk, eh?
Sawchuk was coming along, and behind him was Glenn Hall.
So they're in pretty darn good shape for goaltenders.
Well, they were.
All three of you were three of the great goaltenders of your era. So they sold you to Detroit, or Chicago.
Yeah,
How long were you in Chicago?
I was in Chicago for 2 years, and then I got traded to Toronto.
You're in Toronto about 4 years.
That's right.
Then you were in Boston. But let's go back to the Red Wings years. Did they win any championships?
And we won the Stanley Cup.
1 year.
Mhm.
That is a big thrill.
Hmm.
Was
Definitely.
that
so.
your greatest thrill, being your first Stanley Cup team?
Well, yeah, at that time it was, yes.
And then 2 years in Chicago,
Hmm.
then to Toronto. Who did you follow at Toronto?
Al Rollins and Turk Broda at the time they were splitting their duties.
Yes, Turk Broda was
Yeah, he was
finishing his career.
Yes.
And he'd been one of Toronto's great goaltenders.
It certainly
Supposedly
was.
one of the best come playoff time when the chips are down.
That's right.
That's what he always said. But when he was a young goaltender, he used to, according to the newspapers, I don't think I ever saw him play, but he used to let in a lot of goals that he should have stopped. He'd stick a stick out, and maybe the puck would take a hop over a stick, and the fans, they said, according to the newspapers again, that if it didn't have a thick skin, he never would have lasted in Toronto. The fans would have booed him right out of the rink.
Well, I played many a game against Turk, and I never saw any of that.
You never saw Ben.
No.
Well, he was young, apparently. But was he an irrepressible type? Did he easygoing or what?
Oh, I believe so, but I never had that much to do with him off ice.
Well, I can recall reading about how the fans would boo him because they felt he played some shots. Of course.
It's the fans' privilege. They paid their way in.
Yeah, that's right. I guess that's their privilege. You played under who as coach at Toronto? Connie Smythe was the manager.
Well, he was the owner and manager.
Yeah, owner and manager.
Well, there was Joe Primo at first, and then King Clancy.
Was Hap Day connect with the organization then?
Well, he became manager under Smythe.
Who did you like playing for in Toronto?
Both of them.
Did you?
Yeah.
King Clancy was not only an outstanding player, but he was outstanding as in a kindly way as a character. He had a certain charisma about him that he knew everybody and apparently was well liked.
Oh, he was very, very well liked and respected.
He'd been a great player. He had coached. He was one of the top NHL referees.
Yes.
One time. And
I played when he refereed.
did you? Was he a good referee?
Yes, he was.
There were a lot of good referees. Ted Graham refereed, but I don't think he refereed in the NHL.
Yes,
did he?
yeah, but mostly in the American League. But at
He was
that
referee in chief, I
yeah,
think, of the American League. at one time.
quite possibly. But them fellows, them former players, why they understood the game a little better than a person that hadn't played it, I believe.
Ted Graham, I guess he played for 10 years or 12 years or something, pardon me, something like that in the NHL. And so he was certainly one of Owen Sound's great hockey stars, too. When you played for Connie Smythe, did he interfere with the coach?
Well, if he did, we wouldn't know
He
a
wouldn't
thing
come into
about
the
it.
dressing room in the course of the game and
No.
interfere, as the fans and the press seem to think Harold Ballard interferes with hockey in Toronto.
I
today.
don't think they know what they're talking about.
No,
But again, this is something to write
Yes.
about, eh? Well, now, when you became a Maple Leaf, this was the dream of most young lads because of the NHL hockey broadcast, Saturday night hockey broadcast, known across Canada. Did it please you to be a Maple Leaf, particularly?
Well, it's they certainly had all the publicity up in this area. I was quite proud to be a Maple Leaf, yes.
Who'd you room with on the road when you were with the Maple Leafs?
Teeter Kennedy.
And he was a great player, a real worker, wasn't he?
Yes, he certainly was. A very tough skater, but a hard worker.
Yeah, great man in the corner, as they said. Smythe liked him because he was never quit. Smythe seemed to like that type of do-or-die hockey player. Bill Barilko was another. Was he playing at that time, Harry? Barilko?
He was in Toronto before I was there.
Was he?
Yeah.
And he was killed in a flying accident.
Yeah.
Plane disappeared, and they never did find any trace
No,
of
they
it.
did not.
That's right. So you were with the Leafs how many years?
4.
4 years with the Leafs. Then with Boston.
Mm-hmm.
Now, all told, you played in the NHL how many years? 15 or something?
Something like that.
So you're about 17 years in pro hockey, away from home all winter. It's a long season. You look forward to it at the start of the year?
Oh, very definitely so.
Now, among the Among your great credits were you were chosen on the first All-Star team in a number of years. Was that with Toronto or with Detroit?
With Toronto.
With Toronto.
Mhm.
2 years in a row, I think you were the
Yeah.
#1 goaltender according to the All-Star selections. You also made another record with Toronto. You had 13 shutouts in 1 year.
Yeah.
That was certainly that'll stand probably for all time. The way they're scoring goals today, they don't give much protection to the goaltenders anymore.
Well, they don't seem to. There's quite a few shootouts.
They're real shootouts. That's right.
Yeah.
What style of hockey did you like, Harry? Now, as a goaltender, you'd favor a strong defense in front of you naturally.
Well, it's always, of course, teamwork is a big thing. Your defense is only as good as the forwards helping them out,
That's
and
right.
your goalkeeper is only as good as your defense.
That's right. A strong defense can certainly help make a goaltender look
Oh,
good.
yes.
Of course, a sieve isn't going to look good no matter what,
No,
but a strong defense will certainly help them.
it certainly does.
They're among the defensemen you played with. Who do you admire the most?
Well, that's a pretty tough question.
You played with some good ones in Toronto.
Yes.
You played some great ones in Detroit. What
Well-
about the Russian defensemen? Now, in the early days, there'd be somebody. There were seldom more than 3 up the ice back in the 20s and maybe the early 30s.
Well,
somebody would
I
drop
don't
back.
remember the
You
20s.
wouldn't remember anything about that. That's right. But somebody always dropped back, so that there was always 2 defensemen there. But in your era, the defensemen carried the puck too.
Oh, sure.
Quite a good deal.
Oh, definitely so.
And who did Toronto have then playing defense?
Well, there's Jimmy Thompson, Tim Horton.
Now, Tim Horton, I'm glad you mentioned his name. He was one of the great defensemen too.
Yes,
of
he
that
certainly
era.
was.
And he played for a long time, a long time. And still playing great hockey when he was killed in an unfortunate accident.
Yes, on his way to
On
Buffalo.
his way to Buffalo, that's right.
Well, the Morton would be there then too.
No, Gus was in
After.
Chicago then.
Oh, that.
Now, some goaltenders have, Turk Broda was one, has trouble keeping his weight down so to be agile. Now, you're a big fellow. Did you have any trouble like that?
Oh, a bit.
Did you? Did you have to diet?
No, not really. Just
Not
work a
really.
little harder.
You worked a little harder. At that time, did the coaches, now this apparently is a big thing in football, but football's a little different game, but did the coaches give chalk talks or things of that nature in the dressing room after
Oh, yes.
practice? They did.
Before practice.
Before practice.
And after.
And how much practicing were there? Of course, it would depend on the number of games you had. You wouldn't have a lot of practices if you had a pretty tight schedule of
Well, it
games.
depends on your traveling.
But would you practice for an hour a day or more?
An hour
than
and a
that?
half.
An hour and a half would be
Oh,
the practice.
yeah.
And
Sometimes
would they be wind sprints and things like this and shooting and
And scrimmage.
scrimmages?
Yeah, shooting.
Were the scrimmages really hard checking affairs?
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes they were, right? They meant it.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. That's good. Now, you had a lot of injuries. You had a lot of cuts.
Oh, a few.
Yes, you have a few. You got a few. You got a few scars of honor to show for it. Did you ever count up the number of stitches?
No.
You never did.
No.
Did you have any serious cuts, Harry, that'd take a dozen or 15 stitches?
Not really.
No. Mostly, no mass then.
No.
What would it be from the end of a stick or something like that? Blade?
Oh, deflections and
Deflections.
and scrambles around the net. They get cut by a stick
When you're
once in a
trying
while.
to smother
Yeah.
the puck. You never had any broken bones, but
No.
you did have some leg problems, didn't you? That
Well,
towards the end of your career gave you trouble.
Yes, I had a very bad ankle sprain that put in a cast, and I missed quite a few games then.
Did you Looking back on your career, do you think you could have become adjusted to a mask? Would you, looking back, do you wish you played in the era when masks became?
Well, they were starting at the time I was finishing up. My way of thinking is that a young lad today, he has to be educated with it and to grow with it. That to start when you're 25 to start wearing a mask, why, it's entirely different.
Yeah. You would feel under those circumstances more hindrance than help.
Oh yes, you have a tendency to lose the puck in your feet with a mask
With a
on.
mask on, I see, yeah. Jacques Plant was the fellow who
He
brought
started
that
it.
in. Actually, it makes sense, though, in lots of ways. Just like a batting helmet in baseball has probably saved people from serious injuries.
Well, every year, why they improve someplace along in every game.
That's right. But the goaltenders, watching them play on television, you certainly you certainly don't see that it seems to get the sense that it seems to there are any blind spots, that they're handicapped with it. It's amazing the way goaltenders move and mask and all. Now, among the players you played with and against, there had to be some that stick out in your minds. Did you have a hero as a goaltender? Is there anyone you looked up to especially, or made any effort to adopt his style?
Well, it was pretty tough. When I was a kid,
Yeah.
there was no television.
No. Yes, that's right. We forget that. Now we
Yes.
take these things for granted.
That's
We
right.
listen to the radio, but there was no television. When you went up first, who was the top goaltender in the NHL considered to be the top when you broke in? It was Bill Dernan with...
Bill
Canadians?
Dernan and Frank Bremsek would be...
They called him Mr. Zero or something at Boston. What about defensemen? Who were some of the defensemen that were prominent at that time in the NHL?
Bill Quackenbush, Jack Stewart.
With Detroit?
Yeah,
Stewart with Detroit?
yes.
Was
Bill
called him
Gadsby.
Blackjack Stewart. Was that was he a rough type of hockey player? Was he particularly aggressive or what?
Very aggressive, but he didn't bother anybody if they didn't bother him.
Well, of course, you're looking for it.
Yeah.
You can usually find trouble, eh?
Oh,
And
no,
there's some
he's-
fellows in the NHL could really handle themselves if the going got
Well,
tough.
I don't think there's always just one or two punches land in a fight, and then it's a wrestling match. You're on skates, you get hurt pretty serious.
That's right. That's so. Among the forwards in your era, who did you consider among the dangerous forwards? The goal scorer. Did Richard play? The
Yes.
Rocket, did he play? He was still playing, yes, and still
Oh,
playing
yes.
very, very well at that time.
Yes. Well, when I retired, he had to retire because he scored a lot of goals against me.
He scored a lot of goals on every goal.
Put his name in lights.
What was he had a great shot, accurate,
Mm-hmm.
but perhaps above everything else, what he had going for him was an indomitable will.
Well, he had the will to win.
Yeah, and that's important, isn't it, in a pro
Very
athlete?
so.
And I remember, Harry, you told me one time when you're up seeing your girlfriend, later your wife, that we got talking about Detroit teams, and you told me about Ted Lindsay. And he said, boy, he's a toughie on the ice. He just gives all he's got. And he said, you wouldn't know he's the same fellow off the ice, though. But on the ice, boy, he just wouldn't quit.
Well, he probably hit his own grandmother.
He has to be one of the great players of that era.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
Did he play in the line with Sid Howe?
No, he played in the line with Sid Abel
Sid Abel.
and Gordie Howe.
And Gordie Howe, yes, Sid Abel. Gordie Howe was another one that could handle himself in any kind of going. When he got the puck, he looked like he owned it.
Well, he's ambidextrous. He used shoot left or right.
And big and strong.
Mm-hmm.
And had elbows that they used to talk about Charlie Conacher's elbows in the 30s.
I wouldn't remember Charlie's elbows.
No. But Gordie Howe was pretty good with his
Oh,
elbows,
yes.
too.
Yes.
Who were among the fastest skaters at that time? Sometimes the playmakers weren't necessarily fast skaters, but speed seems to be the big thing in hockey today. It's a helter-skelter style.
Yvonne Cornwallier was about one of the fastest skaters, I think.
Good,
Was
was a
with the
very good
Montreal.
hockey player
Yes.
for Canadians.
Mhm.
Not very big,
No.
but he was very, very good. And I think he played quite a long time, too. When we were kids, we used to talk about players with heavy shots. I guess what we meant was hard shots. Where there's some shooters in the NHL that are followed Charlie Conacher that are supposed to have
Well,
hard shots.
I never played against Charlie.
No. But unquestionably, he had...
Bud Poyle and Roy Conacher, which was a brother of Charlie's, they had very heavy shots.
And Roy Conacher was a great goal scorer, wasn't he?
Yes.
With Boston, he had a great centerman with him in Bill Cowley. Beautiful playmaker.
Yeah.
Was Cowley playing in your era?
Yes. He was at the end of his career with Boston. And later on, Roy Conacher got traded to Detroit, and I played with him there.
Did you?
Mm-hmm.
Good hockey players. Quite a family.
Oh, yes.
Three NHL hockey players, and all great ones. Lionel, Charlie, and Roy Conacher. You mentioned about travel. It was all by train then.
Yeah, percentage-wise, it was by train, and toward the end, we did quite a bit of flying then.
You started to do quite a bit of flying.
Yes.
And is there any train travel now at all, or is it all?
Well, I don't know.
No, you're not. You're not in there now. But
No.
of course, the clubs are now. They're going to Winnipeg, Edmonton, Vancouver, and Los Angeles, and so on. So that's the only way they could maintain that kind of a schedule, by flying. What would you do? Would you play a game and get on a train off at night and sleep in the Pullman cars?
Mm-hmm.
Did you like train travel, or?
I didn't mind it.
Didn't mind it.
Some trips are a little longer than others, but the meals were excellent on the trains at that time.
So then you had just one goaltender. Now the pressure was on that goal. They seem to think today clubs should carry two goaltenders. Sometimes a goaltender, if he's hot, they'll play him in a streak. But they seem to think they have to carry another goaltender to relieve their so to provide relief for each other. That's a far cry from the earlier days. Did you ever feel the strain, Harry, of
Not really,
pressure?
but some goalies require more work than others. Some need a rest every once in a while. Everybody's different.
I see. That's the reason.
Mm-hmm.
But you seem to be able to keep sharp.
Well,
and yet you didn't get exhausted. Is it physical or mental exhaustion from
I
pressure?
think it's more so mental. I myself, I enjoyed a lot of work.
Now, when Terry Sawchuk, he followed you in a couple of instances. He followed you at Detroit. He followed you in Toronto too, didn't he?
Well, there was
at some time or other he played in Toronto
later on. Yeah.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then you mentioned Glenn Hall. Glenn Hall played for a long time and also a great, but he played with Detroit and then with Chicago.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And played for a long time.
Yeah.
Do you feel that sometimes when you look at hockey today, you wish you were playing?
Not really, because I don't watch it.
You don't watch it,
No.
Harry?
Not that much. I might watch maybe 15 minutes, and you see them make some stupid mistakes, and I get frustrated, and I turn it off.
Well, of course, it's diluted with all the clubs there are now. 20-some clubs. It's the quality is diluted. I don't think there's any question of that. How many teams were there when you were playing in the NHL in the 50s?
6.
Just 6 clubs.
Mm-hmm.
So you really had it condensed to the top players of that era. Now, Harry, you played, was it professional hockey you played in San Francisco?
No, it
Wasn't supposed to
amateur.
be.
No,
And you decided to come back to Owen Sound.
yeah.
And you played senior hockey here.
Yeah, I come home. I thought that was a good move. I wasn't good enough to go NHL or anything, and I figured, well, if I got a steady job and I'd come home, and rather than move back and forth, I stayed home. And I'm kind of glad I did.
Well, that's probably turned out well. But insofar as hockey is concerned, you probably didn't have the reach and height to. I remember seeing Jack Portland and Dick Clapper playing defense for Boston. My stars, those fellows could almost touch sticks and touch the boards on each side. Gosh, they were big, tall guys, and they could really reach.
Well, you had Bouchard and Reardon in Montreal. You had Reese and those fellows in Detroit. You had them all over. And then you only had 6 NHL teams, like Harry says. And boy, you had to be top-notch to be.
Absolutely top-notch, that's right. There's a few names that come to my mind. You mentioned that, I'll just go over some of these fellows, and if there's any comments you'd like to make, Harry, about them, knowing them, that were very well known. In management, there was Jack Adams, there was Tommy Ivan, there was Frank Selke, and Connie Smythe, and then Hap Day. He apparently stressed, this is an anomaly in a sense, he stressed defensive hockey, and yet Benny Grant said, when he played in front of him, he was offensively minded. He was a rushing. He said he's still a good defenseman, two-way defenseman, but he liked to carry the puck. But he said there was, I think Alec Levinsky played with him. He said Alec Levinsky was always there. You could count on Alec Levinsky anchoring the defense and half days up the ice somewhere. But anyway, Tommy Ivan hadn't been a hockey player, had he?
Played senior hockey in Woodstock, didn't he? Or Brantford.
But he'd
Brantford.
never played pro.
No.
No,
But he was successful both as a coach and general manager.
very much so.
And Jack Adams, of course, and few people like Jack Adams and Art Ross at Boston had been great hockey men, and Platricks and so on, going way back to World War I up until World War II and after. Now, there were some of the great names of your day. As you said, Bill Colley was finishing up.
Yes.
Very smooth, beautiful hockey player to watch, great playmaker. And the Rocket Richard was still at his best. And he was would they put a man on him to try and they would try to hold him, I guess.
Try
to hold him. Pretty hard. He was an explosive type. He could skate fast, break
very
in
much
quickly,
so. Yes.
and good around the net with loose pucks and so on. I'd like to ask you about Doug Harvey. Doug Harvey played at your time. I like to watch him play on television. I like the way he slowed the game down. This was in the later years of his career to his speed, but he acted like he owned the puck and was just like.
Well, he practically did own it.
It was beautiful to watch the plays he would make. Great passer. He'd played for Canadians, I guess.
Yes, and then he got traded to Rangers.
And was an outstanding defenseman with both of them.
Very much so.
Now, we mentioned about Ted Lindsay, what a scrapper he was. Goal scorer, checker. What about dressing room influences? Were there... Now, this was your sidekick here. He had quite an influence in hockey and lacrosse teams with not only his performance on the ice or on the floor, but he and Moon Wooten were two of the cut-ups in the lacrosse teams. I remember they had a heck of a good time, and it made for a good spirit in the dressing room. This is important, isn't it?
Yes, in the professional game, there's not that much in the dressing room.
There isn't?
No, there isn't.
It's pretty serious.
Very serious.
Do some hockey players It's a long schedule. Do some hockey players, what's the word, coast a bit at times, or some of them look like they're coasting?
Well, if they are, I imagine they would get told by the coach.
What about Frank Mahavlich? It looked, when he played, he looked like at times like he was going to just burn the league up, and other times you wonder what in heaven's name they had him out there for. Skating up and down, he acted like he couldn't have cared less. I don't know whether that is true or not.
Well, that's
the way the press played it.
yeah, that's right.
But when he was going, he was a tough one to
Yes,
to
it
handle.
was.
But then, now these fellows came along after you. Bobby Orr came along after you played.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure watching him play hockey, wasn't it?
As I say, I didn't watch it that much.
You watched it. You never watched him on television either.
Oh, a wee bit.
He was, to me. Did you watch the hockey broadcast?
Oh, yeah.
To me, he was something like Doug Harvey in fast motion. Yeah. He acted like he owned it.
He handled the puck
Didn't
a
he?
lot more than Harvey did, though. He handled the puck a lot.
Yes.
He did
But
a lot
he
more
won the
rushing.
scoring. He won the scoring, what, 4 or 5 years. It makes quite a difference to defensemen.
That had
winning the
never
scoring.
happened before, a defenseman leading the league in scoring. Yet I guess he's still good defensively. But it was beautiful to watch him play. Do you ever watch international on television or see any international hockey? I mean, with the European clubs and the Russians and so on. Do you like that
Some.
style, Harry?
Yes, it's nice to watch their passing.
It's beautiful passing, isn't it?
Yes.
Could you explain this, Harry? Why is it that in international hockey, maybe under international rules, these European clubs don't seem to have all that many offsides? For some reason or other, they're not passing the puck over the blue line to somebody who's breaking in like mad. The game goes on and on and on without a lot of face-offs.
Well, that's because they're passing the puck around. They're waiting for a certain, so they can get a shot on the net and a shot that'll count.
Mm-hmm.
Because possession is 90% of the game. You keep the puck, well, the other team's not going to score.
But that today it looks like some of their thought is to shoot the puck in, maybe on the net, but get it into the other end anyway, and everybody get in there after it. Everybody after it. 5 men.
Scramble.
It's a scramble. It may make for exciting hockey, but it's not scientific hockey.
Well, I
But it
can't.
may suit the fans.
That's right.
And
They're filling the arenas.
It's a business. They're filling the arenas. That's right. Now we come to Wayne Gretzky, and now it's Mario Lemieux.
Mm-hmm.
But these are fellows that, again, they could have played in any era and be outstanding. I don't think there's any doubt about that, is there?
Quite possibly.
Yeah. Gretzky seems to have, and this is what they say about Lemieux, seems to be it's an instinct. He's in the right place at the right time, and of course that's an indication of greatness.
Yes.
It's an instinct. Now, Harry, you come back to Owen Sound in the summers, and you're married in Owen Sound. You and Francis have a family. Tell us about your family. How many in your family? You married one of my neighbors, Francis
Yes.
Buckley, lived across
That's
the
right.
road. That's where I used to talk hockey with you sometimes, and you're overseeing Francis.
Well, I have a daughter with 2 children.
Carrie Ann, yes.
Yeah. And then I have 3 boys.
3 boys.
1 boy in the service in Germany. And the oldest boy, he's in Calgary. And the youngest one, Harry, he's married and living in Owen Sound.
In the grandmother's house across from me again.
That's right.
Good neighbor. And he worked with your sidekick there,
Yes.
with the waterworks department.
Yeah, he's good. He's a good lad.
He is a fine young man. Now we'll get back to hockey in Owen Sound. You played for the Mercuries for how many years? I guess as long as there was a Mercury club. Were you playing, Harry?
No, we were going over that the other day with Ted Briggs. Bob Gilson played the longest with the Mercuries. He had 10 years.
Did he?
Buck Forslund had 9. Art Hayward had 9. And I'd say I played about 5 or 6. But Gilson would come in 47 and played till 57.
Now, where did you play after you played with the Mercuries?
Oh, I went to Meaford for a year, and Port Elgin for a year, and Collingwood for a year.
Tell us about the Collingwood and Meaford days, because that ties in here today.
They were good series. Harry came over to Collingwood one year, and we had a lot of Owen Sounders in Meaford and Collingwood. Gord Henry was in Meaford, and Harry was in Collingwood, and we had some good series. We had some good games.
Gord Henry, who went into the NHL, I guess, shortly after you, or at least went into professional hockey. He played some in the NHL shortly after you, Harry. He grew up as a boy in 14th Street West, and they lived across from us then. And Gord played for quite a long time, and was that in the
Hershey, in the American League.
Yeah. He was for years with Hershey.
Oh yes,
wasn't he?
mm-hmm. They were a farm team of Boston at the time.
Oh yes, he did, and he went up and played some games with Boston.
As a matter of fact, Cooney Wildman played with the 20 grades.
Mm-hmm.
Why, he coached Gordon Hershey.
Did he?
Yes.
Did he? He was one of the great hockey players that played here in Owen Sound too. He was a top NHL centerman in his day. And then he went, I think, with one of the top American colleges. He coached hockey for a number of years.
After he left Hershey, he went. I forget what.
Harvard or Yale.
One of them.
One of the top universities. So you fellows played together, and you're having fun. Towards the end of your twilight of your careers, you're having fun again at Collingwood. But those were good clubs, and very, very entertaining hockey.
Yeah, they had a good following, both teams.
Yes, that's right.
But both teams had good teams.
And Gord Henry played goal for Meaford. Harry here was playing goal for
And
Collingwood.
we had Owen Sounders in Collingwood, and they had Owen Sounders in Meaford. So it was always a good game.
Now, besides that, you got interested in another sport. I guess financially interested in another sport. You got into the racetrack business. Can you tell us a little about that? That was fun, I guess, too. Fun and
A lot of work.
and business, a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, Jim Keeling started it. He got Orangeville rolling, and which other Owen Sounders are involved. Doug Gillespie, Tommy Burlington, Tony Keeling, myself. We're shareholders. And,
This is in the Orangeville racetrack.
yes, and then later on, they purchased 2 racetracks out in the West Coast, which they're still operating.
So the Orangeville operation, and they've been very successful.
Yes, out the West Coast.
Did you ever get involved with the horses directly? Did you get into the?
Well, I got involved with them, betting them.
But you were a starter, weren't you, with the?
Well, I drove the starting gate with the trotting horses.
Yes. This was at. You never went out to the west of Vancouver, though.
Not to work. No, I've been out visiting, but not to work.
But that's been a successful operation.
Yes, it has.
It's amazing the crowds, too. That now in sport, it's just amazing. To think back in the 30s. That you'll scarcely remember. It's so darn tough. I think the NHL limit was $7,500 top salary, and there might have been the odd one to get a bonus to get over that, but I think that's what Benny Grant said. That was the top, $7,500. It's amazing today when you think of the salary schedule.
Oh, yes. Well, of course, everything's ridiculous.
Inflated.
Yeah.
That's right. So how's your health been on the whole, Harry? You're looking good.
I feel pretty good.
You feel pretty good. You're working out fairly regularly. I tried to get in touch with you the other morning, and you were out for some early morning exercise.
Do a little bit, not too much. Not losing any weight anyhow.
That's the struggle as we get older. Anyway, it's very nice to be able to meet with you fellows this morning. Harry Kazarian here, he's had some health problems. He's retired a little bit early, but he made a great success of his career with the Public Utilities Commission here, and at the time of his retirement, he was in charge of the Waterworks Department. So, and your son is in the Waterworks Department, and so there's a tie in there too. So we thank you for being with us this morning. It's been a pleasure to talk with you fellows. You've been two men that have more than made your mark in hockey here in Owen Sound and elsewhere, and it's to your everlasting credit, and your marks will stand for a long, long time, maybe all time. That all time is a long time.
Yeah.
But those being chosen in the first NHL All-Star teams is a tremendous achievement, and those 13 shutouts, I don't think that'll ever be equaled again. It's most unlikely. So thank you both.
Thanks,
Pleasure to
Jack.
have you with us.
Jack.